Okay, welcome to the third lecture in Module 1. And in this lecture, I want to discuss setting up Photoshop's color settings, if you will, so that you'll be dealing with Photoshop in the, I guess, most efficient way. All right? Now, where we go to get to the color settings dialog box is under the edit menu, and this would be the same on the PC as in the Mac. And we come down about, well, almost down towards the bottom, and you're going to see something called color settings Command Shift K, and if you remember, the preferences was Command K, so because this is kind of a color settings preferences thing there, they just added the modifier key of Shift. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that on the PC it would be Control Shift K. But anyways, we get this dialog box. Hello, there it is. All right, I'm just going to do this to show you that by default we would end up with the North American general purpose. All right. Now, this is where I see a little bit of contradiction in Adobe, but I guess they have to start somewhere. All right. So our default color settings for Photoshop, all right, so the working space, so to speak, they give us the sRGB color world here. This guy right there. All right. But not all of us are geared for that or set up for that. Now, sRGB, if you're working and doing stuff, I guess, web-based or video-based, then sRGB is a good place to be. But as a photographer, I don't want to be in sRGB. What I would rather be in is Adobe Rgb 1998, or I might even want to be in Pro Photo, but most definitely not sRGB. Okay, so the CMYK is fine, and all this other kind of stuff is good. I don't want to be in the sRGB. So changing from North America General Purpose 2 to North America Pre-Press would be an option for graphic designers and for photographers. All right, so now at least at this point we're living in the Adobe Rgb 1998 color world. And if you're a digital photographer shooting in Camera Raw as an example, then you've got your camera color space set up to Adobe Rgb, and then you're more than likely exporting out of Camera Raw in Adobe Rgb 1998, at least I hope you are. So now when you export your images out of Camera Raw and eventually bring them into Photoshop, they'll be in the same color space, and you won't get those annoying dialog boxes that say, you know, you're living in one color space but your images are coming to you from another color space. What do you want to do? All that annoying stuff. We can eliminate that by setting up Photoshop to live in the same color space as the images that are coming out of your camera. All right. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to be working with digital images that came from other sources or came from the days when you didn't know you could change the color settings in your camera and you're shooting JPEGs in the sRGB mode and all that kind of nonsense. But for the most part, this is where we need to be. Now, for some people that want to export out of Camera Raw in the Pro Photo color world and all that kind of stuff, then what you would do is you'd come in here and click on this and choose Pro Photo, and depending on what you're doing and how you work and all this kind of stuff, you can turn these check boxes on or off. In the beginning, I would suggest that you leave them on and read the dialog boxes, get used to what they're saying to you, and then once you're kind of done, then you can go and, you know, do whatever you want with leaving them on or leaving them off. But now this is a custom setup here. So I would come over here and I would choose to save. And personally, I'm going to turn off these guys. All right, and I'm going to choose save. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this as John's custom settings. There you go. And I could put in some information that would be valuable, although I don't know why I set this up, but anyways, John's Pro Photo RGB settings. There you go. All right, so there's a description down there. So if you come over here, you can see down at the bottom that there is a little bit of a description. In the drop-down list now, you can see that on top of the American Prepress General Purpose, we also have John's Custom Settings. So based on what you're doing in your workflow, you may want to change these around. If you're a web person, then you would probably want to change the North American, or change to the North American Web Internet. You're back into the sRGB, but most importantly, your gamut has been now set to 2.2 as opposed to dot gain of 20% or whatever that was. All right, so we may talk a little bit more about the Gamut 2.2 in other training videos, but just let it be known that the Gamut on a Macintosh is 1.8 and the Gamut on the PC world is 2.2. It just has to do with the midpoint of your black to white ratio scale, whatever it is you want to call it. And since the majority of people are actually using and viewing stuff on a PC computer, that they've decided to set this up to 2.2, and I think it's a great idea. All right, so I'm just going to go back up to the North American Prepress. All right, and I'm going to click OK to get out of this. There is more, I guess. If you click on the more options, you have all of this kind of stuff down here. Everything that's dealing with this, I really don't think the average person is going to have a need for, but I've got it in painful detail in the accompanying PDF. All right, so I'm just going to go back over to this. I'm going to click OK. Now there's something else I want to talk about, and that is we've now got Photoshop set up for viewing your images, looking at them, doing some editing on them, and you're in the same workspace as the images that you captured them with your camera, as an example. All right, so now the next thing is, what if you're getting ready to send something off to be printed somewhere? I know that's a new thing for a lot of the new digital photographers today. They just kind of look at them on their iPads or iPhones or their screens and send them to friends, and they look at them on Facebook or whatever it is. But there are people that still do Photoshop work for print, whether you're going for a graphic designer or you're actually printing your own on your inkjet printer. There's a couple of things that are, again, a little bit of a contradiction as far as I'm concerned, coming from Adobe, but Adobe has to start somewhere, so let's not be too harsh on them. All right. Now, when we're looking at our image, we're working in the color space that we need to be in. That's fantastic. We've already dealt with that. But what about the color space of the device that's going to display our image, print our image, if you will? So what we need to do is we need to go into the View menu, and we need to go inside the Proof Setup and take a look at the options that we have available to us. All right, and by default, Adobe is assuming that the end game for us is going to be a printing press working CMYK. And that couldn't be further from the truth. All right, so now, if you are doing things and most of the stuff that you're doing is screen-based, then I would say come over here and set something up to Internet Standard RGB. All right, at a minimum, if you've calibrated your monitor, then you go with this guy. But I would say, this doesn't mean your images are living in sRGB. It just means the document window that Photoshop is showing your image in is going to simulate what the colors would look like and the brightness values would look like if it was on an sRGB thing. All right, so if I go ahead and change that, did you see how that changed? That's a heck of a difference between working CMYK. All right, do you see how that is set up? That's what the image looked like, I guess you could say, when we're looking at it through a prepress set of eyes. All right, and if we go over here to the sRGB, you can see that it's a much more limited color space. The color of the sky has changed a little bit, and all that other fun stuff. So this is where some of the gee, I worked on my images in Photoshop. When I uploaded them to the internet, they didn't look the same. Gee, I wonder why. All right, because you were previewing them under pre-press. Graphic designers pre-press, the pre-press for going to the machines that print magazines and catalogs and all that kind of stuff, which has a larger color gamut than the sRGB. Right? Now the other thing I was talking about earlier, which was your gamma, and I was mentioning that the Macintosh was a 1.8 gamma and all that kind of stuff. If I come over here and do this, you see how much lighter that got? All right. If I come over here and just go back to the internet standard, you'll see that it goes much darker. This is based, I believe that this is based on the 2.2, and the 1.8 is a little bit lighter. So if you're doing things based on everything's going to end up on the web, screen display and all that kind of stuff, I would come in and choose this guy. All right. Okay. So now the other thing that I want to talk about is, and I'm just going to do this very, very quickly, all right, is if we were working and sending something off to a lab, then you would come into your custom, and then from here you would choose your lab, and in this case here I can actually choose say Costco as an example. All right, I'm just using Costco as an example because everybody has, or a lot of people have, Costco accounts. And so you can see that I have some for Ancaster, Ontario, and other ones for Mississauga, Ontario, based on the proximity of the client and all that kind of stuff. So you can actually see what it would look like if you're using glossy or matte paper or something along those lines. All right? All right, device to simulate sRGB, and that is... and preserve color numbers. Oh, never preserve color numbers. Oh, good Lord. Now you see we're back over to where we were before. Much, much better. All right. So there you go. So this is the better way to have things. Don't preserve color numbers. Honest to goodness, you don't want to do that. You saw how my colors went all over the place. All right. One last thing I do want to talk about is something called Gamut warning. All right, and Gamut warning is something that we saw an option for over in our preferences. All right, now take a look at my sky, and you'll see my sky has gone all gray. All right, and if I turn the Gamut warning off, you'll see it goes back to blue. So basically what that is telling me is that these colors are way too bright, and they will probably not reproduce with inks as we would expect them to. All right, so now if I do a Command or Control K to bring this up, and we come down to transparency and gamut, you can see here is the color. All right, that's where you set that up. If you don't like it, you click on this, and using the Adobe color picker, you can choose any other color to be your gamut warning. Rare will you need to change it, but if gray is not showing you as best as you need it to be, then choose something else. All right, again, I don't know that many people that need to come in and change that. So I'm going to come in here, and there's my gamut warning turned on, and I think there's some stuff going on here on the rails as well that say that things won't print properly either. Okay? All right. Thank you very much. That wraps up everything as far as preferences are concerned and setting things up for color. The only thing that deals with color we haven't really talked about is specifically getting set to print, and that we'll do in a later